Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Laura Proctor, I'm with Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario. And as I said previous, welcome to today's webinar. It's the grandparent scam we're highlighting, and education is our best defense, of course. So we will begin today's webinar with our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we gather on traditional territory of a number of First Nations and acknowledge their stewardship of this land throughout the ages. We seek a new relationship in the original peoples of this land, one that is based in honor and deep respect. So just a few very general housekeeping items today. Communication in today's webinar, all attendees are automatically muted during the webinar. All of our speakers will be available through video, and we are delighted to have ASL interpreters here today, and you'll be able to see them in the make sure you click your gallery view and you will be able to view the ASL, both of them, during the whole webinar today. You can adjust the view of your screen by dragging, there's a line between the presentation and the speakers, and just simply drag the line back and forth to make either the speakers larger or the presentation larger for your convenience. And of course, we want to encourage everyone to engage in the chat box, but please keep your questions to the Q&A box, and we'll be able to answer some of the questions that come up during the webinar today. And of course, like all of our webinars, we do record these webinars. They will be made available on our website a few days after this webinar is recorded. And evaluation, it will only take mere seconds. A pop-up screen after the webinar will come up, and please, I encourage you, we really rely on your feedback. So I encourage you to participate in the evaluation. And this is really what gears what we offer to you today in our webinar choices. And of course, we want to respect everyone's confidentiality and privacy during our webinars. So we appreciate that many of you may have your own personal circumstances or issues that you may want to address, but please refrain from putting identifiables in the chat box. And of course, my information will be made available after the webinar. And if you'd like to reach out to myself or one of my colleagues and discuss a private issue, we encourage you to do so. So for those of you that haven't joined one of our webinars, as I said, I'm with Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario. We have a very simple mission, which I feel everyone will agree with, is we envision an Ontario where absolutely all seniors are free from abuse, have a strong voice, feel safe and respected. And the ways in which we do this is, first, we are generously funded through the Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility, and we are mandated to implement and deliver the provincial strategy to combat elder abuse. And you see three key pillars in this strategy, which really guides our work on a daily basis. So pivotal is our public education and awareness, training of all frontline service providers across the province, and then that key coordination of community services. So let's jump into today's webinar. Since it is March 1st today, it is the first day of Fraud Prevention Month. And this year's theme is, recognizing, rejecting, and of course, the encouragement around reporting any cases of fraud. So we're thrilled to have Detective Constable David Conforti. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Welcome, David. He is a detective constable with Durham Regional Police Services. He has over 17 years of frontline police experience, with the last 9 years spent in various investigative units. Most recently, he has been assigned to Serious Organized Crime Branch in the Financial Crimes Unit of David. So we welcome you today, David, and I hope I didn't hurt your last name that bad.
No, that's great. Thanks very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. education at the end of the day is extremely important to what we're trying to achieve with Durham Regional Police and with any police department across the province and across the country. So it's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to present to you a real life scenario that took place, and I'll take you through right from the start. You'll see my slides up here. Our project was called Project Monaco, and it's involving what we've coined the Grandparent Scam. Now, briefly, a Grandparent Scam is a phone call that is usually directed to an elderly person, and it's a phone call from an unknown person that immediately cuts into an emergency story with the elderly person on the other end of the phone. And we have seen that emergency story be something to the effect of, this is the police and your grandchild hasn't been involved in a serious accident. And in order to get them through the court process, we will require a certain amount of money. And the only way to do this and go about things is if you listen to me and follow my instructions. So right off the hop, the person on the other line becomes nervous or thrown off guard, and that's oftentimes the first catch where they start to go along with the person on the phone that's trying to take their money. So the accident ruse is one way that the fraudster actually sucks the person in. And recently what we've been seeing is another startling piece to a lot of elderly people, where the person on the other end of the phone that calls them is telling them that their pension has become unsecure and it's being defrauded. And in order to secure that pension, they'd have to pay a certain amount of money, which they'd be reimbursed. So obviously a pension being very important to any elderly person, that's they go along again with the instructions of the person on the other line. So here at Durham Regional Police, we saw a spike of the Grandparent Scam in around late November, early December, and to date, we've had 65 Grandparent Scam reports. So that's only the ones that have been reported to us. There may be many more, but we know of 65 just here in the Durham region. Recently, we have seen the calls for grandparent scams decrease, but with our other policing partners in various jurisdictions, we've seen their cases increase. So this is multi-jurisdictional. It doesn't just happen in Durham region. It happens everywhere. And that's a big piece to us as investigators, as we're trying to keep everything in line as we go through. And I'll explain that as I go through the scenario. So once the elderly person actually kind of buys into the scam that is being portrayed to them by the person on the other end of the phone, someone actually goes to their home and picks up money. So the elderly person is directed to go to a bank and take out usually under $10,000. They're given a host of reasons why they're taking out that money in case they're questioned by a bank teller. And then they're given directions on how to package the money and leave it on their front porch, where someone will come and actually physically pick up that money. And that's where we became as we started to see these cases being reported to us in late November, early December, we had a meeting within our office in the financial crimes unit, and we had to come up with a strategy to try to investigate the matters further. As the reports were coming in, there were telephone numbers, and as we investigated those telephone numbers, we found that they too were fraudulent, registered to plazas in Quebec or various addresses that didn't even exist. So we had to strategize a way to try to dig deeper into this to try and get more to the core of who was responsible for this and the operation and how it worked. So that's when Project Monaco started. As soon as a grandparent scam was reported to our communications department, the serious organized crime unit would receive a call and we would go to the actual person's house that had received that phone call. So on December 15th, there was a call that was received to a residence in Oshawa. And I think it's important to mention that most of these phone calls that are received are to a landline. We haven't seen an overabundance of these calls to cell phones. So the elderly victim was contacted on their landline, and eventually they became suspicious of what was going on. What Durham Regional Police and my unit decided was the best course of action to try to get more to the core of this was we deployed a surveillance team to the area, knowing that these fraudsters would be going at some point to pick up the money that they directed the elderly person to get from their bank. We also deploy undercover officer, and they begin to communicate with the fraudster on the other end of the line in order to try to obtain more information. And then the surveillance team that's in the area keeps a lookout for anyone that is going to the house to pick up the package. So in this case, our undercover officer was speaking to the fraudster on the phone on December the 15th, and something, we're not 100% sure what, kind of made the fraudster obviously uncomfortable. And they essentially aborted the whole fraud and hung up on our undercover officer. But prior to them doing that, the person who was also part of the scam had entered into the neighborhood where our elderly person lived and was sort of lurking about. At that point, our surveillance team didn't know exactly what this car was or their involvement. So a license plate number was retrieved, and then short time after the fraudster on the telephone aborted their fraud, that car actually left the area. So that was added to our report, and we kept that vehicle information obviously close at hand to see if perhaps that vehicle would end up at any other crime scene. The following day, we received another call in Oshawa for the same thing. A elderly person was being directed to take out a large sum of money and leave it for somebody that was telling them there was an emergency. So another grandparent scam. And when our officers deployed to the area, that same SUV from the day prior was very close proximity to the elderly person's residence. So a vehicle stop was conducted on that vehicle, and in fact, they were involved. after an investigation. And that was kind of our starting point of this whole investigation and how we've moved forward with it. So that person was identified as a courier, and a courier is essentially exactly what a courier is. It's the person in the fraud ring that is enlisted to go and pick up the money from the victim's house, and they take that money and deliver it to someone else that's involved in this fraud. The courier is an important piece of the puzzle, but they're usually a small role player. But in terms of a police investigation, it's a great foothold in order for us to try and expand our investigation and get other players involved. So once this courier was identified, they were obviously interviewed by us, and we were able to get more information. We seized their cell phone, and we learned that the courier was directed to the location to pick up the money by a dispatcher. And that dispatcher was responsible for making sure that the courier picked up the money and dropped it off at another location. So with that information, we got further details about the dispatcher. And through various investigative techniques, we were able to identify who that dispatcher was. So we went from getting the courier who picks up the money to identifying who the dispatcher was. So we're moving our way through this fraud ring in order to try and get deeper to the core. And once we identified the dispatcher, we had the grounds that we gathered through our investigation to get a search warrant for that person's house. And they were, in that search warrant, one of the big things that we look for is anything that is going to lead to getting us further information. So as I said before, we can continue moving forward. And that is, in this case, especially this type of case, actually, electronic devices. They're very important. Electronic devices, as we all know, are capable of doing so much now. A cell phone is capable of mapping and word processing, and there's all kinds of information contained in those electronic devices that can direct us to the next person involved in this scam. And essentially, the lower level players will hopefully lead to the next step. So those electronic devices were seized from the dispatcher, and we have confirmed at this point numerous multi-jurisdictional grandparent scams involving just the two people that we've arrested. This investigation's ongoing at the time, so we're continuing to liaise with our policing partners in various jurisdictions all over the province. We've also put together a database to enter the information that we have centrally, so that way, whether you're in Niagara or in Windsor, if one of these grandparent scam comes in, the telephone number can be run through that database to see if it links up with the case in Durham. And since we've identified people, that would help solve additional grandparent scams. That's how Durham deals with these grandparent scams at the moment. Like I said earlier in my presentation, these grandparent scams have seen a large decrease in the Durham region, but we're learning that other jurisdictions are seeing an increase right now. And there's a decrease today in Durham region, but one thing I've learned through my experience is that tomorrow we can see another spike. And that's where awareness and education is a huge piece. Now, I've told you about how Durham Regional Police responds to these types of incidents. However, every other police service does things in a different way, and those ways are based on resources that they may have, and what they've decided to do as a best practice. So if you live in different areas, a fully marked police cruiser and an officer in uniform may arrive, and they may do more of a back end type of investigation instead of trying to actually catch the person in the act like we are. Both are very effective. It's just a different way of doing business. So I'm just speaking on behalf of what our unit here at Durham Regional Police has found to be effective with our resources. But like I said, other police services responses may differ. Again, gathering all the information in this, it's not something that happens overnight. These investigations are multi-layered. There's a courier who's kind of the lowest person on the ladder, and the dispatcher's the next one, and there's multiple layers that until the person is at the top. And it's what we've learned also from investigating these with our policing partners in different areas is that there isn't just one cell that's doing this. There's multiple groups that are doing this right now, and they're obviously doing it because they're finding success. So we're trying to get the information out through presentations like this, through the media, and we here in Durham Region communicate with our various partners in the community that have constant contact with elderly people in order to get this message out. So I do really thank you all for having me here today in order to get this message out. I'd be happy to take any questions that anyone has specifics. If I kind of was jumping all over the place clarification, I'd be happy to take those now.
Thank you so much, David. So there is one question. You had alluded to just landlines being connected. So the question is because landlines are connected, is that solely because the addresses and to addresses and phone records?
Yeah, so that's what we've kind of concluded. We don't have any real solid information that that's the reason that they're targeting landlines, but landlines are easily searched online right now, whether it's 411.ca or any other website. You can get a person's name, you can get their address, you can learn a lot from them, and even through just searching the web with various names and stuff and addresses and locations, these people may be able to find more out about our potential victims. And we've actually seen that in a few cases that the correct name of the person, of the victim's grandchild has been used. Now, whether that was a coincidence in those couple cases or whether it was something that was well researched by the fraudster, again, we haven't been able to confirm, but it's a well-rehearsed it's a well-rehearsed fraud. And even the whole fear factor that they're using, they'll use multiple people in the phone call. In one case that we received a statement from a victim, they said that the person on the phone was speaking to them and they heard what they thought was their grandchild crying in the background. So there's all kinds of lengths that these fraudsters are going to in order to scare and ultimately control our victims.
Mm-hmm. And is it true that most of these calls are coming either, middle of night, early morning hours, where they're feeding on the fact that we naturally are a little bit unalert at those hours of the day?
So we have seen them take place at those times, but really there hasn't been a consistency with that time of day. I know in the two cases that I mentioned with Project Monaco, they were both midday type of phone calls, and they weren't early in the morning where that almost element of surprise could play into things.
And one other question for you, David, is there an estimated total loss, a value loss of what these victims have suffered?
Right now, I believe that at last check, here in Durham region alone, like I said, they have kept it to $9,000 per incident, but we are well over $100,000 at this point. So they are finding a lot of success in this type of fraud.
Absolutely. And we know that victims rarely report to police. So I'm assuming you guys at DRPS can assume that many other older adults in Durham region have been affected, correct?
Yes, and I said that right at the opening.
Mm-hmm.
We have 65 reported cases. The unreported is obviously an unknown number, but we assume there are a good number of cases that haven't even gotten to us, that we don't know about, that we may never know about. So that's a larger number than what we actually have.
And I think the last number I read through the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center is actually 1 in every 24 cases of fraud or scams is actually reported to police. So that may give our general viewers sort of that idea of what is really happening in our communities. I wanted to draw everyone's attention to these really beneficial slides. David, are these your slides or did we put these together?
No, you put those together.
Oh, okay.
These ones aren't ours.
Well, what I'll do then, that's my indication that I'm going to take a moment and just remind everyone that the key focus in our work is that prevention piece. Ideally, we don't want to see any older adults across Ontario being victimized by these frauds and these pressure tactics. So just a quick couple tips on keeping yourself safe. And of course, the knowledge that you're gaining today, share with your neighbors or your loved one in your family that may be at risk. So ask questions only family members would know. If you're getting these phone calls where there's an elaborate story that your grandson Nicholas is locked up in prison in Ottawa, make sure you ask questions that only you or your family would know. Also, I want to encourage everyone to not be afraid to say no. Avoid those pressure tactics. Many times us polite Canadians, we are, willing to say yes. And then we realize moments later that we probably shouldn't have said yes. So it's never too late to back out, even if you think you've gone down the rabbit hole. Absolutely know who you're dealing with. Never send money, gift cards, cryptocurrency to anyone that you don't know, iTunes, music cards, those type of things. Never give that personal or financial information over the phone or via the internet. And please check your credit report regularly and see what's going on your credit card. Change your passwords frequently. That's the number one step that we can take in safeguarding ourselves online. Review ongoing your privacy and security settings on social media. Fraudsters not only reach out via telephone, but obviously being online on social media, there's certain safeguards that we all need to put in place to stay safe. Don't respond to suspicious texts or pop-up windows. Delete them immediately. I know just over the weekend I was getting texts around deposits in my account. So just automatically delete those. I too got a phone call this morning, and when I answer with the organization I work for, they usually hang up on me before I can engage with them. But make sure that you're hanging up on any of these suspicious calls. And always be careful and be very mindful of who you share images with, either over your cell phone or on social media. That's one step that you can take in staying safe. So I'm just going to check the Q&A here. We do have one other question. Can you tell people how to get their credit reports? David, do you know how? I know Equifax is one of the biggest credit reports online right now.
Yeah, Equifax and TransUnion, those are going to be your big two. And if I can add one thing about know who you're talking to, obviously in the technological world that we live in, these people have gotten far more savvy than they used to. And what you're going to see potentially is a phone number that you recognize. So they are spoofing legitimate phone numbers that will pop up on your call display, such as the police. So we've gotten reports of people getting phone calls from the Durham Regional Police number, and they've called us, letting us know that, you know, we've gotten this phone call from this phone number. And when they give us the information that they receive, and we're able to verify it, obviously, quite easily, it's a fraudster that has been able to spoof telephone numbers. So that technology is out there, and calling your local police department with questions is never a bad idea. And obviously, if there's any doubt in your mind, what we always say is just stop and get your own answers, whether it's speaking to somebody who's trusted to you, or calling the police or a community agency that is up to date with all of the information that's circulating about this type of thing that's going on.
Mm-hmm. Excellent tip. I appreciate that. Always hang up, and you can call that number back. So if it's saying it's OPP calling, you hang up and call your local detachment and see if a call was just made from their detachment. We just got a really great FYI from Constable Monica Lees out of one of your colleagues, David, out of York Region Police, not your colleague. It says here, MTO has issued fraud relating to emails regarding license plate sticker refunds. Absolutely do not open any of these links. So fraudsters are always reinventing the wheel. They're coming up with new frauds on a daily moment-to-moment basis. So I do want to direct everyone here today to some helpful ways in how you can report if you've been a victim of fraud. So of course, you need to call your local police department. If you're in Durham Region, that would be Durham Regional Police. If you're in OPP land, that would be your local OPP detachment or another municipal police service. Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre, they track all of the frauds across Canada. So we would encourage that you call and report, and they will always give you the next steps. You can report via telephone, and they do have a secure online reporting portal as well. And then, of course, Crime Stoppers, if you, there's a lot of shame that many victims hold if you have been a victim of fraud. So you can always report through Crime Stoppers and stay anonymous, or if you're a friend or family member of a victim, we encourage you to always go through Crime Stoppers to keep your confidentiality. And then, of course, around the credit report that we had a question in regards, you can request a copy of your credit report, and you can review that carefully. And this is the numbers and also the websites where you can find your credit reports. There's other companies too, but these two companies would be the most reputable companies to utilize. And then, of course, if you feel as though you need a lawyer, we always promote to go through the Law Society referral service. We are all eligible for a 30-minute free legal consultation with a lawyer in your own local area across Ontario. So this is always a wonderful resource to utilize. And then here's some more legal supports. The Advocacy Center for the Elderly, they're a great legal aid clinic for older adults. There's also the South Asian Legal Clinic, which is a wonderful resource. And then there's always the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee that you could reach out to as well. And then we're lucky here in Ontario, we have the Senior Safety Line. It is managed by the Assaulted Women's Helpline. They are available 24/7, 365, and the wonderful offer, because many times victims find language as a barrier if you don't speak English or French as your first language. So they have counselors available in over 200 languages. And then, of course, please stay in touch with us, Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario. We have various social media channels. We do focus our time on that education, information, resources, and referrals. We do have many wonderful fraud webinars coming up throughout the month of March. And we do offer frontline service provider training. You can just go to our website and find more information and resources, like some of our newly designed resources around protecting yourself and others from frauds and scams. And then one of our hot downloads on preventing and addressing financial abuse. You can find that all on our newly designed and rebranded website. And then these are the webinars that I just mentioned previous. So next week we have protection against investment frauds with the Ontario Securities Commission. And then our one on the third week of March is understanding Ontario's estate administration tax. So please, you can follow us on social media. We always post our upcoming webinars where you can simply register. And I encourage everyone to save the date. We do have our provincial elder abuse conference coming up on March 29th, and it will be a free event for service providers to attend. And then after the webinar, please take a moment and complete our evaluation. And please stay connected. If anyone has specific questions, you can reach out to my colleague, Ryan Rideout, or myself, Laura Proctor. Our main office phone number is right there, and we'd be happy to take a call from you. I'm just seeing that we have a couple more Q&As coming up. So the TransUnion phone numbers again. Let me go back. We're getting a request for the number again. Bear with me, everybody. Here we go. There's the number. We're getting a couple requests. So I'll just leave the slide there for a moment so you can scribble down that information. David, I do want to sincerely take the opportunity to thank you on behalf of myself and my colleagues for coming, sharing your knowledge and wisdom in the investigations that DRPS have been involved in. We appreciate your time. And until next time, we wish everyone a safe and healthy rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye.